Michael Schaefer, Ross Johnson, Matt Schultz, and Landon Fry are all here.
It's free.
Perspective. I've been back and
I'm just gonna say it. I've been thinking it for 10 minutes. I don't want a podcast scared.
Oh yeah.
ashes. Now I've seen the road.
Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. Pregnancy is a gift.
Oh, there are stories to tell.
What kind of paint sticks to asteroids? Like, if you don't prime your wall.
Afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place.
We are called to emerge from that default setting of self-involvement.
Welcome to the Speech Guys, the midst of these speeches from the Old West, grabbing the baton from Sister Blandina, fastest nun in the West. And we're going to stay out west with Lewis and Clark here. All right. Speech comes from a journal entry of Meriwether Lewis, August 18th, 1805. Lewis and Clark trip 1804 to 1806 from around St. Louis area out to Seaside, Oregon and back with about 40 men along with Sacagawea, the Shoshone woman translator whom they picked up at Fort Mandan. Their objective to ascend the Missouri River and find that the last ditch effort of finding that Northwest Passage. And of course, this trip was commissioned by Thomas Jefferson, much to the hesitation of the significant people in the United States, along with as many citizens. $2,500. $2,500 for a big camping trip? We got better things to spend money on. We got to tidy up those borders. Keep those British out.
Wait, what? That's $2,500?
That's what this trip cost.
Really?
Interesting.
The entire thing?
He
bought 5,000 items of medicine for less than that?
Yep.
Wow.
It was all of that Russia's Thunderbolts, all of that X-Lax.
That's the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon sold the LP to TJ for $3 or $15 million.
I think 15 million, 3 cents per acre. A fun fact here, so we don't forget. You hear 3 cents per acre, it's like, man, that inflation, and as much as I'd love to blame Donald Trump for all that inflation, if you adjust that 3 cents per acre for inflation today, I think I've done this before with you guys. You know how much it is per acre?
It's like $5 or something.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say $1. It's insane. So we got quite a deal. We got quite a deal.
Easy deal. Everybody knows it.
Yeah, so that's I think adequate. Sort of set the tone here. Again, journal entry, Meriwether Lewis, August 18th, 1805. And I'm going to go ahead and begin by reading this journal entry. This morning, while Captain Clark was busily engaged in preparing for his route, I exposed some articles to barter with the Indians for horses, as I wished a few at this moment to relieve the men who were going with Captain Clark from the labor of carrying their baggage, and also one to keep here in order to pack the meat to camp which the hunters might kill. I soon obtained 3 very good horses, for which I gave a uniform coat, a pair of leggings, a few handkerchiefs, 3 knives, and some other small articles, the whole of which did not cost more than about $20 in the United States. Dreyer killed 1 deer this evening. A beaver was also caught by one of the party. I had the net arranged and set this evening to catch some trout which we could see in great abundance at the bottom of the river. This day, I completed my 31st year and conceived I had, in all human probability, now existed about half the period which I am to remain in the sublunary world. I reflected that I had as yet done but little, very little indeed, to further the happiness of the human race, or to advance the information of the succeeding generation. I viewed with regret the many hours I have spent in indolence, and now sorely feel the want of that information which those hours would have given me had they been judiciously expended. But since they are past and cannot be recalled, I dash from me the gloomy thought, and resolved in future to redouble my exertions and at least endeavor to promote those two primary objects of human existence, by giving them the aid of that portion of talents which nature and fortune have bestowed on me, or in future to live for mankind, as I have heretofore lived for myself. That's the journal entry. So, why did I pick it as captured in the essay? Here we go. Growing up around
Page 4.
St. Louis, Lewis and Clark occupied a similar mental space as Lincoln for Ross and his fellow Springfieldites. They were national legends that belonged to us because we occupied the geography that would have lingered in their memories. Ross went to Lincoln's house in grade school. We went to Lewis and Clark's sites. In high school, my dad and brother and I began to bike several hundred miles of the Katy Trail each summer, a trail that meanders beneath the bluffs that loom over the same Missouri River the Corps of Discovery ascended. Historical markers and other signage decorate the trail and remark on where deer were killed, Indians were engaged with, or where Corps men were lost for several days. I think there's a natural internal dialogue that manifested there for me. You're doing 100 or 200-mile bike ride with the people you love and rely on. You're in this beautiful, solitary space that feels both transcendent and personal. It's physically demanding. One has to imagine Lewis and Clark felt similar things 200 years before. I've read the journals twice. I've watched Ken Burns' documentary probably 10 times at least over the past 15 years. His documentary comments on the text we just read in a particular way, and the sort of melancholy that Lewis described there always resonated with me. I'm a melancholic person and have always been very reflective on how a transcendent, enduring reality should or can shape a person. The truest thing to me has always been whatever's hardest or most self-sacrificing. Lewis's taking of his own life, about 7 years later, I believe, after the expedition, is of course not an act to admire, but it is an indication of the deep-seated suffering he endured because of his circumstances and/or nature. He also achieved extraordinary things in spite of or because of that nature. I've always been drawn to figures like that, Lincoln as well, because it seems like the good things they do in their life comes from this very sacred interior space where wills are tested against uncompromising moral values shaped by whatever God they believe in. It's a departure from what seems like the conventional notion of a hero or achiever in the form of your Elon Musks or Jeff Bezoses, who seem more loud and forceful in their visions. There's nothing inherently wrong with leading that way, but it's never been intuitive to me how to do that. Instead, I strain in my labors and my loves with a patient, careful, sometimes gloomy existential considerations of Meriwether Lewis and similar historical and saintly figures. Here. First reactions.
I think it's maybe an interesting comp. Just there's a certain type of person that always looks on what they do as not enough. I think most people would look on Meriwether Lewis as uniquely accomplished. Because he was the secretary of Thomas Jefferson before this journey happened. No small feat there. And to just have earned the trust of the president such that you're entrusted with this important mission. Yeah, seems like a big deal. But almost reminds me of almost every saint you'll read about will describe themselves as the greatest sinner, will describe themselves and sometimes even, use the term gloomy sort of, sometimes with this sort of gloomy sort of outlook at times, which I don't think it's like, it doesn't seem like a false humility or like, oh, I'm just so bad, but it's I think there's, at least I got the sense from Meriwether Lewis that it's more of an authentic, just sees himself in the grandeur of all of these things that he hopes to accomplish, and just recognizes that shortcoming. So obviously not not religious in quite the same way, but interesting, kind of analogous sentiment.
I got 2 first reactions and a question, a follow-up clarification. First one on the excerpt of the journal entry, more reflecting. I have dabbled over the years in keeping a personal journal at times in college or late high school. I'd go 15, 20 days straight, just writing thoughts, etc. And whenever I'd go back and reflect, sometimes I'd think like, oh, that was a really good observation or writing. And it's basically almost hundreds of the exact same entries that kind of follow this format to a T. It's just like, here's what happened. Here's who I interacted with and their relations of what happened. At the end, it's like, I'm a failure. I should double down. Like that's like, there must be something fairly standard about all somewhat self-reflecting journal entries of just like, if you're committing to the act of trying to, I don't know, break through or do that, you end up in a place that's like, I can do so much better, and therefore should. That was the first reaction. I didn't know Lewis committed suicide, so I learned that as you spoke through your
Just
intro
now?
there. Yeah, I mean, if I knew it, I forgot. If I knew it, I forgot. No hate. I've brought this group DFW, and we all appreciate his work. So we all contribute.
That would be a fun thing to maybe compare contrasting David Foster Wallace and Meriwether Lewis.
Sure, yeah.
You could write a book, Conversations between Meriwether Lewis and DFW.
Or just have ChatGPT write it.
Just do a
postmodernist later. Postmodernist, that's a little
like
later.
Like a Plato's dialogue, but just the two of them talking with each other.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
And then clarification, you talked about the nature of Lewis as a hero with kind of more of a moral value shaping versus the achiever of Musk and Bezos. Any I don't know, expand on that a little bit more. It seems a little too easy to be like, who's the modern version of Lewis to fit what you're getting after there? Or just like, what do you think greatly differs from the exploratory nature of Musk
maybe
and Bezos?
To sort of distill the association with Lincoln a little bit more. I don't remember where, it feels like it was Lincoln Museum or like a sign at Lincoln's house or something. Sidebar, let's celebrate Lincoln's house briefly. The walk we did at Lincoln's house the morning of Ross's wedding.
Yep.
That was sorry, Ross, you missed it. But that was the weather is gorgeous. Landon bought us all coffees at Starbucks. Oh man, that was great. But anyway, I remember reading.
We could just picture those streets covered in mud.
Yeah, I remember there was some reference to one of Lincoln's early biographers before he was president. And this was after having served in the U.S. Senate, right? He what was he in Washington? Was he a rep?
I think he just had one term as a House of Rep. He lost the Senate to Douglas.
And this biographer remarked something to the effect, or very close to the words of, he was not an ambitious man. And Lincoln had the opportunity to correct that, and he chose not to. And I'm thinking of, it's like, obviously the life that Lewis lived doesn't feel, I mean, it's ambitious, but it's almost like, it almost feels like a circumstantial ambition. Like he rose to challenges that other people put him in. Versus Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or similar sort of tech titans,
very
if
good
you will.
nuanced point. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
They make their own history, if you will. So I'd say, that's the difference. Yeah, I definitely identify with like Lewis or Lincoln and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, if the moment comes to me, I'm definitely like, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. That was the nuance I was looking for. So you nailed it on the head.
Thanks. It was just an okay response, Mike. Don't get too excited with your stuff.
I'll give my first reaction, but then I had a little follow up to what Mike said, and maybe that'll kind of kick us in a little bit. But funny that Landon said that. The whole like this would happen, and then like this kind of introspection following. I also noted like that struck me a little bit in the speech, like how he goes from talking about, this guy killed a deer, this guy got a beaver, traded some port, and then all of a sudden he's like in this like reflective, introspective mode. But thinking about it, the only time I consistently journal is I will journal every time I go deer hunting. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting thing, but it does also usually follow some sort of sitting in this spot, saw 2 does this morning, and then by the end, like very, I feel like in those settings, I'm doing something I enjoy. So it's more like appreciative of the beauty and like a more, reflective outtake on what I'm looking at. But also just gonna be honest, one of my first reactions was it seems like they got a really good deal with the horses. I know that just like struck me. It's like you gave him like a shirt and some leggings. They gave you a horse. Like what? But so those are probably my first 2 thoughts. But I don't know, just one then small thing about what you guys had said, because Mike, you kind of nuanced the different, or how you put Lewis and Lincoln in the same camp and contrast to some of our, tech moguls of today. I feel like one thing, maybe like just listening and thinking then that, I don't know, maybe separates them a little bit, and maybe this is too much for the kind of, as we get off the start here, but like kind of this idea of ambition or whatnot. But I don't know, in some ways I feel like reading that Lewis didn't seem to maybe recognize the moment or the greatness of what he was doing, where like, I mean, literally how many years later just sitting around talking about him, and he had his awesome journal, PBS, Ken Burn, like all this stuff where like, and I'm not saying Lincoln was totally not like that, but I'm picturing like the movie Lincoln when he like, now, like he had such a strong, like, this is the moment, this is going to be earth shaking. I don't know.
Landon, do it.
Yeah.
Now, blood has been spilled to afford us this moment.
Still got it, folks.
Yeah. That was the moment.
So hold on. Maybe I'm just processing what Mike said. I feel like Lincoln was more Bezos and Musk. Like he had to make every single thing he had. He mostly just failed, and he kept clawing his way and angling and maneuvering to climb.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So maybe some other elements. There's stuff I want to get to there. I feel like those are sort of bigger thing. I want to start some more fun adventure practicals, right? Because there's, I think, 2 elements of the trip, or 2 aspects of the expedition that I think sort of facilitate some of these thoughts. So I sort of may talk about them in sort of a just fun way first. So, you have, I do think it's striking how you do read how Lewis, especially, and Clark, but especially Lewis, do feel deeply moved by the environment that they're in. I think it was Lewis, definitely one of them, but who described being in the plains as the Garden of Eden. And in one of the quotes, which I want to play for the post-credit scene, is, we thought that those scenes of visionary enchantment would never have an end. And I think what's striking to me is, well, hopefully it's obvious, how being in that space, had a certain effect, especially on Lewis, on him looking back on his life and in this reflective, thoughtful way. But also just how it's despite the fact that there were so many mosquitoes that seamen would howl at night, that they were still able to have these moving experiences. And at times they were so down and out that they were eating candles, right? And I think that sort of speaks to that is just sort of, as Christians, Catholics especially, is just the sacramental nature of reality with the lowercase s that has this tendency, to point to something beyond it, right? Because I think some people could say oh my gosh, they weren't thinking beautiful thoughts in an environment like that. It just sucked. It was just mosquitoes and just suck. So I think that speaks into something as to just the nature of reality, nature of the world, and the effect it can have on us when we put ourselves in situations like that. And then 2, what was the other thing? Well, I'll just spin it back to you guys. All of us watched some kind of documentaries, Lewis and Clark, either prepping for this or just in the past. Just what are your memories of the trip? Just fun little things that stick out to you that make you say oh, that was a damn fine trip. Wish I could have been there.
Seems like just these 2 different winter scenes stick out. So first winter was mostly in Mandan, and it sounds like was a much more jovial type of setting. There's just a 1-sentence summary of a bunch of journal entries, kind of on a timeline form, which was neat. But one of them is they celebrated Christmas with special food, rum, and dancing. Just kind of fun to think about. The following winter,
I'm sure they were holiday. They didn't want to offend the Indians.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Winter solstice holiday thing with no Jesus at all. But then, so following winter, they're in that, I forget where. They're in a fort. Pacific
Fort Clatsop.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And it was just miserable. It rained all but 12 days over this 3-month stretch. And obviously that would suck, but I feel like those are the types of situations where you're hunkered down somewhere unexpectedly that just ridiculous things come up. And 2 comps come to mind. One, wrestling tournaments in high school, because you wrestle for 5 minutes and then you don't do anything for the next hour and a half. And it's there's a lot of downtime where just a lot of just memorable conversation. And the other scene is the scene in the movie Jaws, where the old sailor guy just starts singing the song about Spanish ladies and stuff. You guys know that scene? Yeah. But just this sort of downtime and there's this pause and then just boom, there's a song and that's what's needed. And that's kind of, anyway, that's what brings people together. I imagine scenes like that, just in the midst of being hunkered down for 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of a Pierre Marquette, Louis Joliet guy myself. A little sprinkling of LaSalle 10 years later, 1680. More of an Illinois River.
Ooh.
But also they preceded Lewis and Clark by like 125 years. So the real first one's down the river. Anyway, I think the one fact that's always stuck with me about the Lewis and Clark that I've learned from you is like they guess the mileage correct based on just looking at each tree or some marking along the river and being like, it's about a mile. Add another one to the tally, and it was, how close was it?
Yeah, it was 4,000 and something miles was the actual distance, and I know that Clark was 40 miles off.
Yeah,
out of 4,000. Crazy.
Yeah. And then I think one of the images I have, I think it's either at the old city hotel, it's now apartments in downtown St. Louis, or it might be at the Drury Hotel in downtown St. Louis. Is just a huge mural, like tens and tens of feet long, of what I would presume to be like a really wide part of the Missouri River in like North Dakota, and just like this expansive valley with like the sand dunes meeting the river, and the river is like the size of a lake. And just, I don't know, just to be the first ones through, and to know that that's even just halfway to getting all the way to the Pacific. Pretty visually. Oh, awesome.
My fun tidbit was literally the mileage thing that Landon just said. So, dang it. Though, quick aside, because you mentioned Marquette, I actually after I learned of Mike's significant interest, we'll say, in Lewis and Clark and reading their journals and blah, 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 I wanted to do like my own cool thing. So I bought Marquette's journal from his trip down the river.
Oh, no way, dude.
Yeah. Not quite as, I don't know. Mike, is your like Lewis and Clark, isn't it like leather bound or something?
No.
No.
But
It's still thick.
Father McShane.
So I preempted
I just remember
of your takes.
Dang it. But I was underwhelmed by Marquette's journal. I remember that. So
I was
mainly just the
literally
volume. There wasn't very much. I'm trying to look for it now. It's got to be.
I was literally just thinking, I should read Marquette's journal, and then
hang on.
But yeah, maybe I don't need to worry about
I'll find it later. It was just shorter than I thought it should be, and it didn't have this, I don't know, the epicness that I was looking for.
I guess two interesting things that stick out to me, might be fun to chat about briefly. Just the physical, maybe three things. The physical challenge of it.
Right.
I'm just imagine the portages. Well, one, you're going freaking upriver. Sometimes when you're canoeing, it's like, drop my beer back there. Let me go paddle upriver 15 yards. And you're like, this sucks. So just imagining going that far upriver.
Right. I was scanning through the Marquette and Joliet, and they were like portage from the Kankakee River to the Illinois, which is like a 2-mile hike. They barely don't cross. And Lewis and Clark are portaging over the Rockies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, then portaging over the Rockies. And reading about how these guys are walking in these homemade moccasins over freaking cactuses while hail the size of softballs is falling on top of their heads. I remember reading, and they mentioned this in the Ken Burns documentary. I forget how many. It was like maybe 5 or 6 guys who got sent home at Fort Mandan because of sleeping on duty or drinking the alcohol, and they thought no one would notice. And I remember reading like the guy, I'm pretty sure all of them were very like repentant because it happened with enough time before being sent back home in the spring of 1805. Yeah. that they like really try to, you know, show to Lewis and Clark, like, hey, we're better, we're reformed, and Lewis and Clark still sent them home.
That late in the trip?
Well, it was after the first winter.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so they spent almost a year with the trip, and they brought the prairie dog. They brought the prairie dog back to Thomas Jefferson. And I guess the other fun little thing, the journal and the documentary remarks on Lewis, and this was before they were able to have secured the Shoshone horses, climbing this mountain ridge somewhat, you know, in the midst of the Rockies, where they somehow knew it was the Continental Divide. Like, I don't know how you know. I mean, you obviously know that water flows one way here on this edge and water flows the other, but it's the Rockies. It's not
like there's one
state,
defined
it's not a
point.
border. Yeah. It's like, how do you know that?
I do remember in the journals that was like a point of identification.
Yeah. And
And
apparently
even
he was wrong, but like he wasn't that wrong. They're like, oh, it was actually right over here. So yeah, that's right. But anyway, it made me think.
But just looking at like the rock, I've looked at it before on a map, and like even when you're sitting there with the satellite view of everything, it's like, I have no idea. Like, how would you?
Yeah.
I don't know it today.
Yeah.
Like, how would you identify it?
And it remind that sense, that experience of Lewis, when you have a long journey and you are able to encounter the physical edge of that journey in such a particular way. I think there's a very specific experience to that. And the most similar one I can think of that had such a specific beginning edge to it in end was last fall. I brought up the Katy Trail, so I bring it up again, so it's fun and poetic there. But when I did the Katy Trail over 2 days, and you know, the Katy Trail, this crushed gravel bike trail that follows mostly the Missouri River, one of these rails to trail things that I had done up to 180 miles of growing up with my dad and brother. Now we just do 60 miles of it out and back. So a little bit over 100 over 2 days. But anyway, I always just wanted to do end to end to experience the entire thing. And yeah, so I did it in 2 days, but I thought it was so neat at the end, but especially at the beginning, because the beginning is just a little bit more of a fine edge. But I remember I took a rental car out to Clinton's. I took a rental car out to Clinton, you know, got there the afternoon before, and I drove to the trailhead where it officially started, because my hotel was like another 3 miles away. I had to bike up to the trail from the next morning. But I remember going, it does feel a lot like Lewis coming up to the edge of that trail when there is literally the trail. What it does is, you know, it comes to a street that it crosses, and the trail comes to that street and it's crushed gravel. And unlike the hundreds of other street crossings along the Katy Trail to the east, this one, there is no other side. It's just a curb. And I remember standing there on the edge of that trail thinking, wow, like this is it. This is as far west as the trail goes. And I found myself, you know, thinking of all the other bike rides we've done on the trail over so many times, so many years. And here I was, I've come to the edge, and I'm going to bike to the absolute other edge of it in the next 2 days. I thought that was so neat. Definitely sort of similar experience. So we have sort of the mortality point, balancing a notion of personal achievement and call to sainthood.
Midlife crisis. That's a fun.
Feeling
That'll get us
midlife.
talking.
Okay.
I feel like that's a fun.
that'll
We'll get us talking.
I'm
Matt's
living
growing
to
out a
be.
mustache.
How
for
many
goodness
bottles
sakes.
do we have?
I'm living to be 120, so you guys will be able to speak to me on this.
Are you still gonna go on our camping trips when we're all dead? Like when you just go by yourself.
Yeah.
Funny.
Set up for
Okay, so
sure.
one element of sort of inspiration for this speech pick is this indication, this commentary on midlife. Lewis was 31. He figured he was going to be about 62. Sadly, he didn't even come close to that, of course. But midlife, you start thinking about what you've done, what you haven't done, what you want to do. Are you being greedy by wanting to do more? Are you being apathetic by not wanting to do more? What things can you identify with in Meriwether Lewis there? Was Lewis wrong to be thinking these things?
So I thought that was a really interesting part of the outline personally, but honestly, I felt like Matt, I think you gave some really good verbiage to some thoughts you've had
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like I resonated with. So like I think we'd be on the very similar page, but I thought you
Sure.
just I liked how you said it and kind of some of the things you said. So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna steal your thunder. I want you to dig into that
Sure.
a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I wouldn't say, well, I don't know. I guess midlife, I guess I am at midlife or getting close, awfully close. Um, but it did seem timely on a few fronts. So like just the last few months, um, a couple of things have come up that have just gotten me thinking about that more. So one, I went to this big PT conference back in February, and just realizing how small of a fish I am in such a rather, and it's like PT isn't even, it's like, I'm not a doctor, a real doctor. It's, I don't know. But even in the PT world, it's like how much work goes into being like a big name PT presenter person. Um, and then how little I've actually accomplished on that front. And there really isn't much of a pathway unless I drastically uproot my life. Was kind of one thing. Another, just having our third child, Zoe, who I love, and is just really beautiful and lovely. But I mean, that also means that I'm spread a little thinner, and if I were to make time to accomplish, quote unquote, something, that basically means I'm going to be asking 50% more of Claire, going from 2 to 3 kids. So, and just sacrificing time with kids. And then the last thing, so my dad turns 70 this summer. Sorry, I'm outing you, Dad. You are turning 70. Most people who you care about know, so who cares? And obviously, as a PT, we see the sick and injured people, so we see the worst of the worst 70-year-olds on average. But yeah, I just seen what a lot. I see everyone's age. I see everyone's health issues and stuff, and I'm like, gosh, 70. Like there's some rough 70-year-olds, and my dad's not. Thank goodness. Like he's in the grand scheme of things, he's in decent health. But anyway, it's just just a handful of things. But I think what comes of that is just I feel like there is a struggle to find balance. I kind of oscillate between shame and disappointment, that I haven't done anything more impressive, that I tend to play it safe. I have noticed some complacency. I know the Father Mike Schmidt's podcast we did a few episodes ago kind of like shook me a little bit with some of that in a good way. But just have a bunch of ideas I don't always act on.
Lucy?
Whatever. Yeah, the Lucy.
Okay.
Yeah, Lucy was the name of the girl in the airport. Is what it was named after. But yeah. And then I also kind of still fluctuate between that and then also this sort of arrogant self-aggrandizement about, I went to PT school, I have a doctorate degree, I went to seminary, and I'm definitely a smarter PT than all the other PTs, and I deserve to be teaching everyone else how they should do their jobs. Even though I really don't have haven't done that much extra work to earn it. And and I'm raising more kids than the average American. So whatever. I don't know, just and I say it in that tone because that's, I mean, yeah, at my worst, that's how I feel about it. I'm just kind of a grumpy old man about it. And anyway, I guess there's just just a lot of like conflicting things there. And Mike, I think you summarized things pretty well in terms of like just discerning between, am I don't know, am I a sissy pragmatist for desiring this sort of humble life, or this kind of, or am I more of a humble, prudent guy who's just, discerning that God's not calling him to a big project right now? And yeah, it's tricky because I don't want to be complacent. I don't want to be, I don't know, overly ambitious, but yeah.
There's Landon reference You've Got Mail. I'm going to reference You've Got Mail again because this quote is
Sounds
just
like we've got
so
mail.
spot
You're a lone
spot
reed.
on to what we're talking about here.
You're a lone reed,
I could
standing
play the clip.
tall.
Shush! It's not that quote. Let's take a listen.
Sometimes I wonder about my life. I lead a small life. Well, valuable but small. And sometimes I wonder, do I do it because I like it? Or because I haven't been brave? So much of what I see reminds me of something I read in a book, when shouldn't it be the other way around? I don't really want an answer. I just want to send this cosmic question out into the void. So, good night, dear void.
Dude, nice.
Cosmic.
It's like the quote overlaid with the. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sure we all do to varying extents, but yeah, I identify strongly with those thoughts there of Matt's.
I feel like
obviously the spell.
You go
Ross doesn't
first.
care. Shut up.
Shut up, Mike. I've got a doctorate. I've more kids than the average American. I should be teaching you right now.
Man, we have a lot of degrees scattered among us. We got one master, 2 docs. Landon is a doctor of life. He's got 1 degree. What an idiot. 3 in 1, baby. 3 in 1.
I've got 2 bachelor's degrees. No big deal, everyone. Anyway.
I wouldn't say I've had a midlife crisis, but I feel like,
You've had
maybe
2.
just to say this, I feel like, I don't know, maybe just to say the same thing you guys did in a slightly different way. I definitely have struggled with am I doing enough, or like, maybe that's just what midlife crisis is, but like, I don't know. I feel like when you said the Matt, when like you said the worst side of me thinks this way, and I feel like for myself, sometimes the worst side of me thinks similar things in terms of, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, blah blah blah. But then I feel like maybe even like the worst side of me then like just digs at myself that I'm not doing enough things. So like I just, and I think I've talked about this before, but like I feel like it's not a scrupulosity, maybe a perfectionism, but like I just look at whoever I'm doing, like whoever I am associated with, I look at something they're doing well, and then like that I'm not doing as well. So like,
yeah,
and I've made like, not jokingly, but maybe more superficial comments about like, yep, if I go golfing, I think about Landon. If I go weightlifting, I think about Matt. If I go running, I think about Mike. And it's like, hey, I'm the worst at all 3,
Yeah.
But I feel like it maybe more like the ones that hurt a little bit more is like I listened to the Biking for Babies episode. It's like, yep, I haven't done nearly enough for the pro-life cause. Or, I don't know, or Landon, maybe some of the things he's done, or like, I don't want to just pat all of us on the head, but like, and maybe more like genuine good things, not the superficial things. Like I will do the same thing. And the problem is like it turns like I've just become like I very easily get frustrated with myself that I'm not doing good enough at X. And it can be, oh man, your kids are better behaved than mine, so there must be a better dad, or you've done more for the
Yeah.
pro-life cause than I have, or like actual good things, not like me, not like running and golf and weightlifting. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like I hit myself much harder on those type of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I feel like that's more like where I struggle. And maybe that is kind of the midlife crisis. I've never like associated it with, oh, my life's halfway over. Where am I at? But I will admit, like sometimes when I hear about these like great figures and I see their age, maybe this is the midlife crisis seeping in. Like, like I'm not looking to the future anymore. It's like these people are
Sure.
actually younger than I am, And I feel like that does make me think a little bit more about like, what am I really doing for society? Um, and like I know all the right answers, I think. Like I know what I would tell someone if they brought this to my attention. Like, hey, that's not actually how you define success. And, those little things you're doing every day, like might actually have much bigger implications than you realize. So
Yeah.
like I often give myself like comfort and like I honestly think about Saint Therese of Lisieux a lot. Like when she died, this is like just funny that I'm weak enough that I need to think of it this way, but like when she died, like no one knew who she was. It's this young
Yeah.
20-something sister in France. Like nobody knew who she was. So like in her mind, when she was on this earth, like no one knew who she was. And yet she's made, right? It's hard to, you can't talk about the impact that she's had on the church and the world. So it's like, I give myself like solace in that, but even that I feel like then I start telling myself that's a weakness because like I want the solace, I want the comfort
Sure.
knowing that maybe I am doing something great. So that's why I feel like the reason I had Matt kind of start that off was that line you said, I'm not sure if I'm a sissy pragmatist or a humble, prudent guy who God isn't calling to a big time project. Yeah, just being totally open and honest. Like the idea of God not calling me to a big time project is a little bit, that scares me a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, there's something that stuck with me persistently from Eric Vernine's new podcast, but it doesn't seem published. But yeah, sorry, Ross, one more thing.
Gosh, apparently I thought I was special. I thought this is the one thing I had that no one else had.
But he interviewed Stephen Braney on the podcast about AI and the effect of AI on art. And Stephen is very good at being realistic, but optimistic at the same time. But Eric's final bell question really stuck with me, and it seems relevant here. He asked Stephen, everything being said, what's something to be optimistic about in the world of AI? And this is also relevant too with what you've said, Matt, before about writing and AI. And Stephen shared this story about an illustrator who worked for a poster printing company. This was, I don't know, late 1800s, let's say. And this guy had a sort of a lower level job. It was just reproducing content that someone else designed. And it was Christmas Eve one night, and for whatever reason, the design wasn't there. They had no designs for this poster advertisement for some kind of product. And the boss, the employer, told this printer guy, like, hey, we got no design. We need you to step up and produce something. And this gentleman, he had, over the last number of years been sort of creating his own particular poster aesthetic just on his own. He was not getting paid for it. It was not commercially available. and he had no idea what would come of this, but he was just producing art for its own sake. And he decided to go ahead and use and apply this aesthetic that has sort of become his thing in his own time, in his own private creations, for this particular application, or this marketing campaign. And he could have just tried to mimic what had already been done and take the safe route, but he didn't. And I wish I could remember her name, but Steven's point was that you would recognize this guy's style. And more significantly, his point was that he was doing this art. He was doing the small things, if you will, because that was the right thing to do. That was the artful thing to do. That was the sacramental thing to do with a lowercase s. And that's the compelling attitude that is probably more saintly that we ought to have, can all have, and sort of is a naturally organic disposition to have towards providence. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
My last thought on that matter, then, kind of jumping off what you said. So something that I've thought about kind of related to this whole topic, at least in how we're talking about it now, and like providence and how it kind of works out, and doing things maybe if you don't see even if you can't see the big picture. So in the catechism, it holds up when it talks about faith. It talks about like the two people it kind of holds up as exemplars of this are Abraham and Mary.
Mhm.
And Father Mike explains in the Catechism of the Year, which because I suck, I didn't even finish, so I only listened to part of it. But he kind of like talks about. I remember like it hit me a little bit. Like they didn't see the big picture, but they just said yes. And thinking about in my own life, then just making it super personal. Like in some ways, so Julie, our 5th kid, is due now in about 2 months, and like I think this is the first time we were maybe this is a sign that we're maturing, honestly, but like we were like, man, in some ways this doesn't really make sense, but we both kind of felt like we should be open to it. Um, so I kind of trying to like apply that to the rest. It's like in saying yes to that, because like I said, it was kind of in a lot of ways this doesn't make sense, but we'll say yes. Like I'm saying no, like to say yes to that, I feel like I'm saying no to a lot of other things. Like,
Sure.
no, if I didn't have another kid, Julie would go back to work 2 years sooner, and that would mean, and I mean, you could just go on and on and on with like that means I'd have more time to be a better PT, or like yeah, we could go on and on and on. Insert whatever you're thinking, Um, but it was like even though this doesn't really make sense, we felt like we were supposed to do it, so it's like yeah, let's go for it. Um, so that was kind of my personal example of that, I guess. Um, but like we kind of have said, like I'd be lying if I said, those temptations didn't seep into my head of like, oh, if you hadn't done this, you could do this, or you could be better here, or yeah, um, kind of being intentionally vague there, but
So I remember there was so this was back on like a retreat I was on and as a seminarian. But the guy who kind of preaching or giving the retreat talked about the virtue of magnanimity and
Virtue of what?
magnanimity.
Magnanimity.
So,
Yeah.
and to be honest, I don't know that I've got a really great like 2-sentence description of it. I feel like it's the type of thing I hear talked about in a lot of different ways. I mean, the literal translation means big souled. So like magna and animus or animation, whatever. So magnanimity, basically, it's sort of like the willingness to just, I guess I think that the way I've heard it most consistently talked about, just the willingness to make like a big sacrifice for others. Like you are a big souled, like you're very like overly generous, not overly, but like, yeah, just greatly generous with yourself. But one of the things he talked about in the like he was just describing what the magnanimous man looks like. That kind of alludes to some of the things you were talking about, Mike, with some of your perceived juxtaposition with Bezos, the Bezos Musks of the world and Meriwether Lewis was just he described almost like a sluggishness in things that don't matter is like part of like what makes them the magnanimous man, right? So is Meriwether Lewis sluggish in sort of this like, go-getter, type of leadership? Perhaps, but he was very thoughtful, very rigorous in planning this whole endeavor. And yeah, like when the occasion rose, right, when he was given this opportunity, he took advantage of it and he ran with it, and he gave of himself in a noble way, right? So anyway, that's just one thought that comes to mind. Just trying to tie all of this together, and that like magnanimity doesn't always mean like we are making the thing happen and we are calling the shots. But yeah, like I have no idea what kind of situation I might find myself in 5 years from now. And I think talking to older couples who I really respect has kind of given me a little bit better perspective on that too. This one couple in particular, like he took a couple of years and he was just working in I forget if it was it wasn't like a bike shop, like he was doing mechanic stuff, but he was working for like a bike company. I guess just selling bikes or something. Yeah, to be honest, I forget the details, but it was the type of job that he was in academia. He's now he's like starting this whole school thing, but just, yeah. And like, that was what he needed. And like, there ended up being this really cool thing he started later on in life. And anyway, all it is to say, like these opportunities we find ourselves in, maybe it's about receiving that in a magnanimous way, as opposed to like the Bezos, like let's make it happen type of thing.
There is one point in here I want to pose for a discussion, and I'll weave it into my answer to midlife crisis. Trying to connect a couple threads here. First, I'm the one with the by far the fewest degrees. So in my life, that has kind of made me a generalist of sorts. And when Lewis writes down, I viewed with great regret the many hours I've spent in indolence, now sorely feeling the want of information which those hours could have granted him. I think, like, I don't know if Lewis, maybe he was an expert in something. It kind of seems like a comment made by more of a generalist trying to sink his teeth into something more specific than a grand adventure. But I'd relate to that. I think yeah, just having reflected, not building up some professional acumen and a sort of specificity that could be maybe like independently applied rather than kind of being an employee, so to speak. But I'll also, Matt had the example of like going to the PT conference and being like, oh man, I could, there's so much more ambition and whatnot that I could have. In those settings of like conferences and like all that I could do, I would say my midlife crisis is more like, I don't know if I have an interest in that sort of ambition the way I did in my 20s. And I think like I'm really okay with that. And it's like all these folks in this proverbial conference are like striving in a way that I'm not really striving anymore. And then so like stripping that down, what do you do with that, or what do you strive for? And I think Lewis gets to that in his next line here, in which he says, the line before, I reflected I had done little, very little indeed, to one, further the happiness of the human race, or to advance the information of the succeeding generation. So those seem to be his two North Stars of which he was trying to contribute to, that Mike mentioned. The one I take interest in and kind of invert a little bit as the object of my ambition is like perhaps not to advance the information, but I think that, you know, with the oncoming AI, and whatever that technology may be, is just like to document and understand like knowledge or prior histories or the sort of really unique non-zero things to pass on to my kids that I don't know, that perhaps have been lost or forgotten, whether it's, you know, being able to slaughter a cow or plant a field of corn without computers in the cab, stuff like that, that maybe it's completely useless, but is a wisdom that feels like it's perhaps going by the wayside and would be worth knowing yourself and perhaps learning it alongside with your kids. So that does relate to Lewis's ambitions, that he's stripped himself down to.
I like that we got there. It was like, I'm not even sure how you got there, Landon. But something about
I think
it seemed natural.
literally the first thing Lewis said. Damn it, that's how he got there.
something about teaching your kid to drive a tractor without AI.
Yeah, so he
I
was
wrote it all
just
out.
like,
I had the outline.
Mike was like, "What?" and I was like,
Jason was like,
"Amen."
whoa,
That.
analog outline. Look at you, man. What is Wendell Berry living with you or something?
Yes, he's right here.
Oh,
Okay. Maybe I see some way we can we can work with this. Yeah. So Landon sort of harped on the words of Lewis. The two primary objects of human existence, by giving them the aid of that portion of talents which nature and fortune have bestowed on me, or in future to live for mankind, as I have heretofore. Nope. I'm sorry. So, what was it you're talking about? Information. Help me out here.
Lewis is his North Stars.
My icons on it: to further the happiness of the human race or advance the information of succeeding generation.
And just lead with it. Just lead us. Help us get there. Spell it
Well,
out.
those were Lewis's North Stars.
Yeah.
Further the happiness of the human race, advance the information of the succeeding generation. I think I would just pose the question, what do you think of those North Stars?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is where you meant to go with this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. And if we like it, great. Like, I feel like maybe an analogy or something like we see in schools, like, so this idea that, well, I don't know. I feel like you could play it out a little bit in the same way of like, just like seeing our kid, like my kids now, I've multiple kids in school. Like, I don't know how to say this without sounding just totally like a doofus, but like they've got plenty of math and science and like smart things that are probably important in an advanced human race, but like I feel like they don't necessarily get passed on like why any of that matters. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So like and I don't know, and we probably I I just said let's go, but I don't know if we have time for all of this. Like like what the purpose of education is and what the schools should be focusing on all of that, but like to kind of bring it into this how we're kind of talking about it now, like I feel like we have a really yeah, I mean maybe that's I feel like I don't know how to like actually articulate the point, but I feel like the analogy in my head makes sense of like and not knocking, you know, math and science and engineering and advancement in all these areas. Like those are actually good, but are we actually teaching kids things that like why those things matter or why those things are good? Um so in a way, like when I see my own children, at least in the second half of things, like advancing um the two North Stars we talked about there, like, advancing I don't remember how it was worded or like passing it on. Like I feel like I'm more interested in passing on why it's important to go camping or to be able to like why they need to spend time outside. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like you can kind of insert your own things there.
Yeah. Right.
Um and I don't think honestly, I can't articulate it very well, so maybe you guys can. But like I was like as I get a little bit older and have more children and as my older kids get older and like they're becoming like they're learning a lot of things and it's really cool to watch, but I feel like I'm becoming much more entrenched in that mindset of like this is what actually matters. Um and I don't know. I realize I feel like I didn't say a lot there, so if that doesn't make
Sure.
sense, that's probably fair, but I also feel like it makes a lot of sense in my head. So maybe yeah.
I think maybe a succinct way to sort of articulate the dichotomy there is the distinction between advancing the information of a generation, advancing that front, as if it's something that's just like floating out there and
Sure.
something that we leverage in order to maximize our economic growth and lifespan, um, compared to advancing the information within ourselves, whether it is considering the virtue which is actually gained when you learn how to you know when Everett learns how to shove his weight behind those rusty John Deere gears or New Hollands, or I don't know what colors you boys fly up there up north. Um, right. Yeah, I mean, and even like just with storytelling and writing, it's like I see a lot of these commercials for AI based writing software. And it's like, yeah, enter in these various prompts and get a story with characters with perfect internal logic. Like, huh? I mean, I understand what they're saying, but we're not made to prompt stories. We're made to tell stories. And there's virtue and growth to be gained in learning how to do that in every inch of that journey. And if the opportunity to participate in the commercial market and make money off of that has been a nice gift for 150 years. And if it disappears because of AI, well, okay, so be it. 150 years was a small blip on the history of humanity where storytellers could make money.
Sure.
But that doesn't
Yeah.
change the fact that
Yeah.
you will still always have those people around you, even if it is just the fire or bedtime, to tell a story that comes from the sinews of your own experience, right? No one can ever take that away.
It was a broad generalization, but I think Yeah, 150 years was the time span that storytellers could make money.
And even then, like only
I never
barely.
thought of it that way. Yeah, I like.
Yeah,
That's
I think
interesting.
like your counterpoint would be like, some pamphleteers maybe, but I feel like a lot of their stuff they always like it got popular after they died, and like it was like yeah, much. I think it holds up. Good point. Good observation.
Yeah.
Homer's, it's not like Homer's descendants are getting royalties for the Odyssey, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Ross, it kind of brings up I remember at Michael Derry's wedding, which is so the day actually before Claire and I's first date. Kind of fun context, but
Mhm.
I remember you asked Joe Olafson.
I remember when I asked. Say it.
Yeah. So you asked Joe Olafson, who or gosh, I don't know, I forget the wording. Who knows more about the stars? Someone who just read a Wikipedia with all the information about stars, or someone who spent months looking at the stars in the evening? And I think
What a great
that
question.
hits. Yeah, I think that hits
I think
on
Ross
a lot of the
stole that
AI
from
stuff,
me.
but even some of the like.
I think it's an original. I don't think you read it in your.
He steals. That was the
something
perfect.
of your
Did AI
own.
tell you that was the bourbon
Ross,
talking. That was the bourbon talking.
but yeah, and I think that kind of gets at. I mean, it's so. I mean, Meriwether Lewis would have been. I mean, and that idea would have been much more modernism than postmodernism. I think the problem was with modernism more so than postmodern. I mean, postmodernism is kind of a logical reaction to modernism. Where it's like progress, facts, learning all these things, and it's like, oh wait, there's conflicting things. Oh wait, there's these perspectives we don't know about. Oh wait, what? And then that's where you get this sort of like subjectivism, nothing matters type of thing, which is a little bit more
Better
postmodernist.
definition.
Um,
Thank you for clarifying that.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's not a complete definition of the postmodernism, but it's a yeah. I mean, the problem was more with that the modernism aspect of things, where it's like, yeah, there's not this experiential kind of reflective thing where you're kind of receiving reality, you're receiving your life experience, and I mean, I think ideally you should be receiving your calling and your adventures from God as opposed to manufacturing them, and that's yeah, and I don't, and maybe this is Meriwether Lewis's way of wrestling with that dynamic. I know, because he's like a deist, right? Like, I don't know if he had like a strong notion of like a personified God, right? So if God's not a person, he's this like entity or force or, kind of logical necessity. Yeah, like he's not going to call you to something. Like a logical necessity can't invite you to do something great with your life, but you could find yourself there and maybe kind of dance around it, but not quite hit it on the head. But anyway.
Final bell.
Ding, 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 ding.
All your strength, all your power, all your love.
What round is it? It's 15. One more round. There's no stopping this now. This is our round. Don't stop it now. We started, we don't stop. All your strength, all your power, all your love, everything you've got. This is your whole life. Do it now. Now.
It's funny how we just know. You just know it's time.
The final bell. How do you pronounce Sacagawea?
Watching this documentary. I definitely remember watching it with you.
With
and
me?
I vaguely Ross, but I don't know, was Matt there?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
I vaguely remember
I
leaving. the
blamed
oven
you for
on.
leaving the oven on.
Okay. Short and sweet. Final bell.
I remember this story. I don't know if I was there.
We went to like Mike's niece's birthday for like an hour.
Yeah.
And then I
Hold on.
remember
I gotta
Joe
pee. Give me a
Olafson was
second.
with us
Okay.
because we went to some park in St. Louis and he whipped out a hammock. That's all I remember.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
This was the Bradley years.
Oh, okay. I saw Landon's about journaling. Maybe we can read an excerpt for our final bell. Just some random excerpt that's interesting but okay to share.
That's deep. That could require some research.
I mean, it would take me like a minute to go get it.
Okay. Okay. We read Lewis's journal. Maybe we should read ours for our final bell. Let's all go find our journals. So I found my journal when I'm almost 31. So I'm almost the same age as Lewis here. Some of these are pretty heavy.
I can go.
Well, hold on. I need to pick. We all need to be ready first.
I'm just gonna do the entry about that I already shared, but I'll do the full entry.
Aw. Matt, August 21st, 2019, my first V4. I don't even bowler. I don't waste my time with that. I actually do circuits on easy 12s now. Like up, down, up, down. I think I found one that's a good balance between vulnerable and light.
So, in looking for my hunting journal, I found a lot of other journals. Apparently, I journal more than I realized. I'm still looking through what to present.
Do you guys all handwrite your journals on paper?
I dictate mine and then ask AI to make it sound better. Freaking beautiful, though. It's art.
I've always typed mine on a laptop.
Oh, this is fun. I'm going to go with this one.
Okay, we all have our choices, I think.
Oh, man, I've got a good one here. You guys might just want to close mine.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm not crazy excited, but adequate for mine.
Go
So
for it.
mine is when I was almost 31, Lewis's age. So this would have been early August of 2019. Morning, Jesus. Thank you for my time today to run, prepare for school. I was teaching Chabot, and discern living here. Good night, Jesus. I talked to mom and dad about hosting. I asked Steve his opinion. He thought it was great that I was just considering it. Lauren came over for dinner. I remember that. I made vegetarian quesadillas, which were really good. Tomorrow, Steven and Taylor are arriving for the canoe trip. Lauren gave me good advice on. I need closure, at least better clarity than I have right now about how she feels about me. Tomorrow are 2-mile repeats. Talk to Becky about prep senior's first day and pack for the trip. Whew! And that was the lightest one I could find.
Mine is from November of 2015. Sunday night. Saw a big group to my east and north on the hill about 40 minutes before shooting time. At first saw a doe and yearling. Called Dad, who said he also saw them. He said he had seen a small buck run a circle around them and then go back into the woods, and then I saw the small buck come out. Kept watching and more came out, and I think there ended up being 12. A little before shooting time, I tried calling because they didn't seem to be coming closer. I had already tried my doe bleat with no luck, so I rattled and grunted. I think one looked up when I grunted, but other than that, they didn't seem to hear me. Rob saw a doe at Broadfield, and it might have been the biggest doe I've ever seen. Overall, it was another great weekend. On Thursday night, we told my family that Julie is pregnant. We had John given a, quote, announcement, end quote, in the living room. We called everyone in, and John was laughing. After a while, he came over to me and said he forgot. So I whispered it to me, and then he said it. Everyone was really excited, and it felt great to have my family finally know. At Mass Saturday night, during communion, when Father Bill gave Julie a blessing, he gave the baby a blessing over Julie's stomach. Pretty special for the first blessing to be on Deer Weekend and by Father Bill. Got a lot of alone time in the blind, and it was really nice to have that time for reading, thinking, prayer, and experiencing nature and just relaxing with some quiet time. I love deer hunting, and it's always exciting to get one, but it's all those other experiences and the family time combined with it that make it such a special weekend. Another great year in my baby's first hunt.
Nice.
Very nice. From the story I shared earlier, the full excerpt that relates to our Old West theme here, written from the shadows of the Cathedral of Seville, Spain, a couple summers ago. When the Spanish people dress up in flowy dresses and make big celebrations by trotting around like a gypsy, it's super high class and has a different sort of name. Alejandro even remarked how one Spanish street dancer was far more artistic in her interpretation of the dance than the prior gypsy dancer we had just seen at the Prado. But in essence, the only difference was the tradition was given by the Spanish dancer rather than the Arab gypsy culture. It had been repatriated into upper class Spanish traditions. Imagine a hypothetical. If we took Native American Indian dances around winning great battles in the field, while joyously celebrating our tribe's victory, and repatriated them into something of modern usefulness to enhance community spirit, the appropriative racial horror. Chief Illiniwek. This kind of aptly describes our effort of cultural building that we attempted to bring together in America from 1918 to 2007. And in that sort of describes the entire American century. November 1918, World War I ended, Europe decimated. The veterans came back, went to college, started all kinds of traditions from the war, Chief Illiniwek included. Googles what year the iPhone came out. Sure enough, 3 months later, after the Chiefs' last stance in 2007, everything seemed to change.
When did you write that?
3 years ago.
1995.
Why? There's a little bit more reflection on the Tower of Seville. The bottom part is like Roman blocks. The middle part is like Arab triangles intricacy. And then the top part is like Christian, super intricate. And so it goes on into like all three cultures are one tower. And it's great. But they kept building on top of each other. And we attempted to do that and like build it all in, but it didn't work out. Yeah. I didn't want to drone on.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting thoughts there, but not for tonight. So, thanks for drinking
with us.
Be safe out there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Let's go ahead and keep hanging out in the West, shall we? Cue the music.
His last night he spent asking a friend to put down a buffalo robe on the floor of Grinder's stand. He slept that night, tried to sleep that night. He told people that Clark would be coming. And he shot himself.
Nashville, Tennessee, October 18th, 1809. To Mr. Thomas Jefferson Monticello. Sir, it is with extreme pain that I have to inform you of the death of His Excellency Meriwether Lewis, Governor of Upper Louisiana, who died on the morning of the 11th, and I am sorry to say, by suicide. He had shot himself in the head with one pistol and a little below the breast with the other. James Neely, U.S. Agent to the Chickasaw Nation.
The work we are now doing is, I trust, done for posterity, in such a way that they need not repeat it. We shall delineate with correctness the great arteries of this country. Those who come after us will fill up the canvas. We begin. Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson had estimated that it